Hello, cooking enthusiasts. What you are seeing is my dad and I blending up some root vegetables, primarily leftover roasted carrots and a little bit of parsnip. We started the recording a little bit late. It had already been blended with one whole egg, and we ended up adding a second whole egg. I thought this would be the best technique because for this gnocchi recipe, the eggs are the primary liquid we are adding, and this allows us to blend those other root vegetables as smooth as possible. Once that is relatively smooth, we next combined it with leftover mashed potatoes, and this poses some interesting challenges versus just working with plain cooked potatoes. Because a regular potato gnocchi is just cooked potatoes, maybe a small amount of egg, and just enough flour to give it additional structure, you might think the solution for working with these mashed potatoes is to just add even more flour. We did still add enough flour to give it structure, but we aren't adding that much, and instead we're adding even more eggs than you might see in a conventional potato or vegetable gnocchi. That might seem counterintuitive because the eggs are adding even more extra water content, but they're also adding structural protein, and that means we are treating this mixture less like a conventional potato gnocchi and more like a Parisian gnocchi. A Parisian gnocchi is the same dough that you would use to make cream puffs and eclairs, called pâte choux, but instead of being baked or fried, it is boiled as dumplings and treated like a pasta. It makes a very delicious, fluffy dumpling texture, and you can understand how the cooked potatoes with the added liquid and fat of mashed potatoes is more analogous to the cooked flour paste that goes into pâte choux. However, leaning back more toward a conventional gnocchi, we did add some potato starch to compensate for the other vegetables and later added flour. At this stage of the process, the mixture wasn't quite as smooth as I was hoping, so we ended up giving it a very brief few blitzes in the food processor, and after that, we added our regular wheat flour. Potatoes and potato starches can develop some gumminess, but I was less worried about being delicate with that mixture and much more worried about developing gluten, which is why the ingredients were added in this order. The plan was to simply pipe this dumpling mixture directly into the simmering or boiling water, but before that, we did do a few test dumplings just using spoons. After a few tests, we determined we needed to add a bit more flour. Unfortunately, the mixture was already in the Ziploc, so if you attempt something like this, definitely do your test dumpling while the mixture is still in a bowl, so it's much easier to add ingredients. Once the dumpling mixture was in a good place, we took a brief detour to make a little topping for the final gnocchi dish because everything was going to be very soft. This is a very sort of classical Italian technique called a pangrattata and was basically what you did when you couldn't afford a nice hard cheese to finish pasta dishes and was generally just fried breadcrumbs with a little bit of garlic. We were actually out of garlic from holiday cooking, so this was breadcrumbs, a little bit of scallion white, a little bit of walnuts fried up, and then finished with my Italian herb and seaweed dry blend. Finally, it was time to actually make the dumplings, and this ended up being a pretty perfect quantity of mixture. You can see we have a string tied across the opening of the pot. The water is more simmering rather than boiling, and you just use the string to cut your little dumplings as they fall into the water. And we split this into two general batches. Basically, once the majority of the dumplings in a batch have floated to the surface, you begin to fish them out. And we were actually briefly dipping them into some cold water because these were still very delicate dumplings. That sort of shocks the proteins and the starches to be a little bit firmer before the next step. Then it's just a matter of repeating the process with the rest of the mixture and getting them ready for the next. Now to finish the dumplings slash gnocchis, we fried them in a little bit of butter. Again, they were very delicate, so we didn't go crazy trying to get them browned or crispy. Then we deep with some freshly made turkey stock from the actual turkey carcass, tossing that around to emulsify it with the butter, and then we're adding leftover turkey dark meat as the sort of protein component. Then the sauce was already pretty creamy and delicious, but we had it, so we added a little bit of leftover gravy for flavor and body, and that was also homemade, made from primarily chicken stock fortified with the turkey neck and trim from before cooking. Finally, we finish with a little bit of homemade creme fraiche, which is also rich, but in a way brings a acidic component, which can help balance the overall dish. Then it's just about serving and garnishing with some fresh cracked pepper, the scallion greens, and lovely pangrattata flavored breadcrumbs. And overall, this was a really delicious dish from leftovers. Hopefully, this can give you some inspiration for any holiday other big meal leftovers you have. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thank you for watching.